Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Akkad Reader's Briefing. This is the podcast that takes one complete issue of a major magazine and turns it into a single focused audio briefing, 30 to 60 minutes long. Today, we are bringing you a reader's guide to the August 2026 issue of Defense News. Let's start with the cover, where two developments stand out. The first is Freyja. 9 nations are now backing Ukraine's Freyja air defense system as an alternative to the Patriot, and they want it operational within a year. The second comes from Australia. The Army's 3rd Brigade is absorbing heavy armor, and that one change drives a sharp rise in everything the brigade needs behind it: fuel, ammunition, people, maintenance, and base support. Behind those two stories, 5 larger questions run through the whole issue. First, nuclear weapons. Britain is putting more money into its deterrent just as the last strategic arms treaty between Russia and the United States expires. What kind of security environment does this new phase of nuclear modernization create for Europe and for the wider world? Second, repair. In a high-intensity conflict in the Indo-Pacific, could the United States Navy use its own repair network and the shipyards of its allies to return battle-damaged vessels to combat quickly enough to influence the course of the war? Third, the changing air. Fiber-optic first-person view drones, Shahed-type aircraft, balloon-borne weapons, autonomous interceptors, all of these are spreading. How will traditional air defense systems and crewed aviation have to change in response? Fourth, production. Artillery shells, spare parts, rare earth materials, radar systems, shipyard capacity. Every one of them has become a limiting factor. Can the United States and its allies truly shift their defense industries onto a wartime rhythm? And fifth, cooperation. Freyja, the American-Ukrainian drone partnership, Arctic defense, mine clearance in the Strait of Hormuz, none of these work without several countries pulling in the same direction. How do political commitments become military capability that is deployable, effective, and sustainable? Taken together, the articles in this issue are about pressure. Pressure on military alliances, on industrial capacity, on logistics, on maintenance, and on the speed at which forces adapt to new technology. Modern defense is not only a question of advanced weapons. It also depends on the ability to manufacture them at scale, repair damaged platforms, secure critical materials, support formations that keep growing more complex, and coordinate all of that across national borders. And that points to the central challenge. Political promises and technological breakthroughs matter only when they can be converted into reliable military capability under the pressure of real operations. With that, let us turn to the articles one by one.
Section 1. Global Security, Alliances, and Nuclear Deterrence. 1.1. UK ratchets up nuclear spending with new warhead and delivery planes in the works. The British government confirmed that it will spend more than £63 billion on its nuclear deterrent over the next 4 years. The package will fund Dreadnought-class ballistic missile submarines, SSN ACUS attack boats, and the new Sovereign Australia warhead. In fiscal 2024 to 2025, the defense nuclear enterprise already consumed 18% of the defense budget, and the Public Accounts Committee projected that the share could rise to 1/5. Australia will replace the aging Holbrook warhead carried on Trident II D5 missiles, while being developed in parallel with the American W-93 and sharing the Mk-7 reentry body. Britain also reaffirmed its decision to buy 12 F-35A fighters and rejoin NATO's dual-capable aircraft nuclear sharing mission for the first time since the Cold War. France has announced plans to expand its arsenal. China is also enlarging its nuclear force. and the last remaining strategic arms reduction treaty between Russia and the United States expired in February. The article said the world may be entering a new era of nuclear rearmament. 1.2. NATO allies promised Trump they'd secure the Arctic. They've got work to do. Through an exercise involving about 30,000 troops and the stepped-up Arctic Sentry effort, NATO tried to show that Europe and Canada could defend the alliance's northern flank. Over the past decade, Russia modernized the world's largest icebreaking fleet and reopened dozens of Soviet-era bases, while the Arctic provides the shortest path to the United States for Russian intercontinental missiles. Officials and experts said the Allies still need long-term investment in icebreakers, submarines, drones, satellites, radars, and underwater surveillance. About two-thirds of Russia's second strike nuclear capability is based around the Kola Peninsula, and 6 nuclear-armed submarines serve with the Northern Fleet, so NATO continues to monitor the Barents Sea and the strategic gap between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. The United States currently has only 2 operational icebreakers, while Russia has 42. Climate change is also altering how sound travels through water and shrinking the range at which submarines can be detected. Nordic countries, Canada, and Britain have increased investment in ships, air forces, bases, and Arctic troops, but the future level of American participation remains uncertain. 1.3. Testing is now underway. Zelenskyy confirms progress on major U.S. defense deals. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said the United States had begun testing Ukrainian-made aerial and maritime drones and had given Kyiv very positive feedback, marking the first substantive movement in months on a long-stalled production agreement. Zelenskyy has valued the full deal at $35 billion to $50 billion. It would reportedly establish a 50-50 production venture and draw on as many as 200 Ukrainian companies, but it still awaits approval. President Donald Trump also pledged to give Ukraine a license to build its own Patriot interceptors. Russia had fired 68 missiles and 351 drones at Ukraine in a single night, while the war with Iran had heavily consumed American interceptor stocks. Ukrainian crews were at one point firing only 1 interceptor at an incoming ballistic missile instead of the standard 2 to 4. At the same time, cheap interceptor drones were taking on more of the work. Ukraine built 100,000 of them in 2025 and doubled the production pace during the first 4 months of 2026.
1.4. Kyiv military chief salutes outgoing U.S. Army commander as war rages in Ukraine. Ukraine's commander-in-chief, Gen. Oleksandr Syrskyi, publicly thanked the departing head of U.S. Army Europe and Africa, Gen. Christopher Donahue. Syrskyi said the partnership Donahue built delivered long-range systems, strengthened Ukrainian air defenses, and saved thousands of lives. Donahue served only 18 months, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had requested his resignation, although the Army did not explain the reason. The departure came during strained U.S.-Ukraine relations and a review of American forces in Europe, while European officials feared it could foreshadow a reduction from the roughly 80,000 U.S. troops on the continent. Donahue had advanced NATO's Eastern Flank Deterrence Initiative, integrating Allied ground forces, drones, and data. Retired Admiral William McRaven warned that repeated removals of senior officers could discourage candid advice and increase the risk of military miscalculation. 1.5. Italy busts Russian spy ring, collecting data on Ukrainian air defense vulnerabilities. Italian investigators broke up an alleged espionage network in Rome. Police recorded a man accused of being a Russian military intelligence officer seeking information on the SAMP-T air defense system already supplied to Ukraine, the Hamper missile, and Leonardo's Michelangelo dome system, which was due to be tested in Ukraine. Prosecutors accused former Italian intelligence official Gavino Piras of using Russian cash to recruit military sources and leaving micro SD cards filled with information in a hole in a wall. Each package was reportedly worth €4,000. The Russian request list also covered Iranian nuclear facilities, European rearmament, long-range missiles, an underwater drone, and solid rocket motors. Piras' lawyer denied that he passed classified information. Italy then expelled 2 Russian military attachés and described the case as serious and unacceptable interference in Italian institutions and national security.
Section 2. Air Power and Air and Missile Defense. 2.1. 9 nations back Ukraine's Patriot alternative, Freyja, and wanted flying in a year. Ukraine joined Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, and the United Kingdom in an anti-ballistic missile coalition intended to accelerate production of the Freyja system and make it operational within a year. The initiative emerged amid a global shortage of anti-ballistic interceptors. The United States had increased Patriot output, while Europe expanded production of SAMP-T, IRIS-T, and NASAM systems. But the gap between demand and supply remained wide. The coalition will establish common operational requirements, joint technical working groups, governance mechanisms, and a roadmap toward the first operational capability. Ukraine will lead the project and supply Firepoint's FP7 X interceptor, while partners provide radar, tracking, and command and control systems. The interceptor is designed to hit a ballistic target at roughly 15 miles altitude. Zelenskyy said Patriot interceptors normally take 24 months to build, while the coalition's members hold different pieces of the system and could create a complete Freyja system within 12 months. 2.2. Only 1 in 4 F-35s is fully mission-capable, GAO finds. The Government Accountability Office found that the F-35 fleet's mission-capable rate fell from 67% in fiscal 2021 to 44% in fiscal 2025, while the full mission-capable rate dropped from 38% to 25%. Air Force officials attributed part of the decline to software delays, scarce parts, and corrosion. The Joint Program Office launched the Global Support Solution Reset, aiming to raise the 2 rates to 80% and 65% by 2030. The effort would require $13.7 billion more than previously planned through fiscal 2031, and readiness could worsen before it improves. A Lockheed Martin study identified 48 parts that suppliers could not produce in sufficient quantities, including canopies that had grounded aircraft. GAO also found that the program office paid incentive fees while readiness and parts supplies stagnated or worsened, and it could not produce consistent records of those payments. The Pentagon operates more than 800 F-35s, plans to buy about 1,700 more, and estimates lifetime U.S. sustainment costs at $1.6 trillion.
2.3. Apache going down near Oman, a sign of air combat evolution, analysts warn. A U.S. Army Apache attack helicopter went down off the coast of Oman after an engagement with a Shahed drone, and its 2 crew members were rescued hours later by an unmanned surface vessel. Public information remained limited. Analysts said the helicopter might have collided with the drone during an intercept, encountered a more advanced variant, or faced a proximity fuse. The fact that both crew members survived what appeared to be a controlled water landing argued against a direct warhead impact and detonation. The larger significance was that attack helicopters, once dominant over the battlefield, now face unmanned systems that are smaller, cheaper, and more lethal. The Army had already received its first pilot-optional Black Hawk for testing, and analysts argued for pairing crewed aircraft with uncrewed assets so that human judgment remains nearby without placing people directly in the line of fire. The Apache can still perform its missions, but it may need to operate in groups and under tighter controls. 2.4. U.S. Air Force awards first CCA production contracts to General Atomics and Anduril. The U.S. Air Force cleared its first collaborative combat aircraft for production 4 months ahead of schedule. General Atomics received the FQ-42A contract, and Anduril received the FQ-44A contract. The jet-powered, semi-autonomous aircraft are intended to fly with the F-35 and the planned F-47, extending sensor and weapon coverage while taking on risk that would otherwise fall to pilots. The Air Force plans to buy more than 150 combat-capable aircraft by the end of the decade, with a long-term goal of roughly 1,000. 6 companies enter the autonomy software pool, and the service plans to select a primary provider by summer 2027. A government-owned modular open architecture will allow software to move across vendors and platforms, while the full license fee will be paid only when the software delivers a combat capability aligned with warfighter needs.
Section 3. Naval Warfare and Wartime Sustainment. 3.1. U.S. couldn't repair battle-damaged ships in war with China, study finds. A RAND report concluded that battle-damaged U.S. warships could not be repaired quickly and returned to combat during a war with China. American maintenance facilities could be overwhelmed, the theater could lack sufficient spare parts, and the Navy could not assume that shipyard capacity or political willingness in Japan, South Korea, and Australia would automatically be available. A 2025 tabletop exercise included a collision in the Strait of Malacca, damage during an escort mission in the South China Sea, anti-ship missile strikes while defending the Philippines, and multiple destroyers damaged while intercepting an amphibious assault on Taiwan. Participants struggled to determine what resources were required and whether ships could be repaired locally. They also assumed peacetime rules and standards would continue, while maintenance organizations and operational commanders reached conflicting decisions. U.S. participants did not fully understand Allied port locations, repair capabilities, or access requirements, and allies worried that repairing American ships could bring Chinese retaliation. The report recommended streamlined command authority, advance access agreements, and expanded deployable repair teams, flyaway assessment units, and expeditionary mobile repair facilities. 3.2. Germany moves 2 ships to Djibouti, with multinational Hormuz mission possible. The German Navy moved the minesweeper Fulda and the supply ship Mosul toward Djibouti in preparation for a possible mine clearance mission in the Strait of Hormuz. After passing through the Suez Canal, the ships were expected to arrive within 5 to 7 days. They carried 140 German service members, including mine clearance divers, vessel protection teams, and personnel responsible for autonomous systems. The ships were still operating under the European Union's Aspides mission and were contributing situational awareness during the Red Sea transit. Any German mission in the Strait of Hormuz would require separate parliamentary approval. It would also depend on a durable end to hostilities, an international mandate, and the consent of Iran and Oman. The multinational mission, led by the United Kingdom and France, was described as strictly defensive and independent, with the purpose of reassuring commercial shipping and conducting mine clearance. Iran warned that European warships entering the region, even for mine clearance and shipping protection, would face a decisive and immediate response.
3.3. India's 3 new naval ships boost maritime firepower. India commissioned 3 domestically built naval vessels, the multi-role stealth frigate Dunagiri, the shallow-water anti-submarine craft Exail, and the survey ship Sanchodok. Dunagiri displaces about 6,600 tons and can perform air defense, anti-surface, anti-submarine, and long-range strike missions. It carries BrahMos cruise missiles, an MF Star radar, and Barak-8 surface-to-air missiles. Agrey uses lightweight torpedoes, indigenous rocket launchers, and shallow-water sonar to protect coastal waters, while Sanshodok supports hydrographic survey work. The 3 ships contain about 75 to 80% domestic content, although India still depends on foreign suppliers for propulsion systems, naval radars, missiles, guns, and heavy torpedoes. The vessels are among 19 ships India plans to add this year, while about 90% of the country's trade by volume and its vital energy imports move by sea. 3.4. Congress seeks to limit U.S. Navy vessels built in foreign shipyards. The Senate Armed Services Committee moved to eliminate the broad presidential waiver that allowed overseas ship construction in the name of national security. The draft would permit the Defense Secretary to have allied shipyards build no more than 2 bulk fuel carriers and 2 roll-on, roll-off ships, while requiring evidence that overseas construction would be faster or provide a material readiness and deployment benefit. Mission-critical systems, command and control equipment, and secure communications would have to be installed in the United States or at secure allied facilities. The Trump administration had promoted a Finland model that used foreign shipyards, while planning to grow the fleet from more than 290 Battle Force ships to 395 in fiscal 2027 and 450 by the end of fiscal 2031. The congressional restrictions reflected a dispute between rapidly increasing ship numbers and protecting the American shipbuilding base, sensitive technology, and wartime repair capacity. 3.5. The U.S. Navy is eyeing next-generation carrier-based drones. Here's what they might do. The U.S. Navy issued a request for information on a family of next-generation carrier-based drones for Ford-class and Nimitz-class aircraft carriers. The service wants the platforms to perform 8 missions: anti-surface strike, land attack, anti-submarine warfare, air combat, electronic warfare, intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, aerial refueling, and resupply. Strike range must be at least 1,000 nautical miles, while the aircraft must possess autonomous carrier patterns, deck taxing, dynamic tasking, threat evasion, and automated aerial refueling. The proposal must also support affordable mass, rapid production growth during a surge, and integration with existing naval supply chains. The Navy is also considering vertical takeoff drones for destroyers and mobile sea bases, pointing toward a future carrier air wing that combines 5th and 6th generation crewed and uncrewed aircraft.
Section 4. Defense Industry, Supply Chains, and Capital Consolidation. 4.1. U.S. industrial base is becoming stronger for wartime production, study finds. A Center for Strategic and International Studies report found that the U.S. defense industrial base was becoming more capable of sustaining a major war, although it remained far from true resilience in manufacturing lead times, stockpiles, and supply chain security. Roughly 10,000 new firms entered the defense market in 2 years, and non-traditional companies received more than $120 billion in contract obligations in fiscal 2025. Munitions contract obligations had risen 330% since fiscal 2010. As the wars in Ukraine and Iran rapidly consumed stocks of guided weapons, the Pentagon expanded multi-year procurement and allocated 49% of its fiscal 2027 munitions request to weapons costing less than $600,000 each. U.S. rare earth production rose from 95 tons in 2022 to 8,900 tons in 2025, while foreign military sales increased from less than $20 billion in 2015 to more than $80 billion in 2025. The report stressed that the government is the dominant buyer and that different results in speed and volume require different purchasing methods and durable demand signals. 4.2. Manufacturing woes hamper U.S. 155mm ammo production. The Pentagon Inspector General found that manufacturing bottlenecks were undermining the U.S. Army's effort to increase production of 155mm artillery shells. The Army had planned to reach 100,000 rounds per month by October 2025, but production stood at only 36,000 rounds per month in March 2026. The limiting factor was metal projectile body production. After a $469 million investment, the Mesquite, Texas plant had not produced any metal parts at Met contract specifications. To save time, the plant adapted equipment designed for the older M107 shell to manufacture the different M795 projectile, and the Army accepted the risk of using unproven equipment. 3 existing plants were left to make up the shortfall. The Inspector General recommended reviewing the contract, the use of funds, and the award process while determining whether any money could be recovered.
4.3. In a red-hot counter-drone market, Echodyne CEO sees radar demand boom. Demand for Echodyne's miniature radars rose sharply as armies rushed to counter drones that dominate the modern battlefield. The company's chief executive said demand for affordable short-range radar could grow tenfold by 2030. When its new factory reaches full capacity, annual output is expected to rise to 30,000 radar panels. A book-sized model costs about $40,000, while a carry-on-sized model costs about $160,000. EchoGuard can typically track a small quadcopter at about 1 kilometer, while the larger Echo Shield can track the same type of target at about 3 kilometers and process more than 1,000 objects at once. The company's radars have been integrated with cannons, high-power microwave systems, lasers, and other directed energy counter-drone systems. The article said no single system would win the counter-drone competition. 4.4. Fails to buy French underwater drone maker Exail in $4.5 billion deal. Thales agreed to acquire a 35.5% stake in French underwater drone maker Exail Technologies and launch an offer for the remaining shares at an enterprise value of €3.9 billion, or about $4.5 billion. Exail supplies surface and underwater drones for European autonomous mine countermeasure programs and also produces inertial navigation equipment. Thales expects the mine clearance market to grow at a high single-digit rate through 2030, and the addressable market for uncrewed anti-submarine warfare to expand 8-fold by the end of the decade. The acquisition would combine Thales' sonar capabilities with Exail's autonomous mine clearance, seabed mapping, anti-submarine warfare, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance systems. Thales also expects Exail to add to earnings per share from the first year.
Section 5. Unmanned Systems and Battlefield Technology Proliferation. 5.1. Frustrating Israel. Fiber-Optic killer drone technology has arrived in southern Lebanon. Fiber-optic first-person view drones used by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon caused losses and damage to Israeli forces. The drones maintain a direct link between the operator and the aircraft through a spool of fiber-optic cable, making them resistant to radio jamming and conventional electronic warfare. The operator can retain a view of the target until the final seconds before impact. Hezbollah first published video of a fiber-optic drone attacking an Israeli tank in late March 2026 and said each aircraft cost about $300 to $400. The systems appeared capable of local production using 3D printing and commercially available electronics. Analysts said skilled operators, night vision capability, and detailed knowledge of southern Lebanon's terrain further increased the advantage, while Israeli forces appeared insufficiently prepared. The technology and tactics could spread through open-source video, observation of other battlefields, and exchanges of experience between Iran and Russia. Any military entering a conflict may encounter some form of technology first seen in Ukraine. 5.2. Japan joins the global craze to field interceptor drones. Japan plans to deploy autonomous interceptor drones around radar sites, bases, ships, and other critical locations by about 2027. The systems are intended to detect and defeat swarms of long-range suicide drones such as the SHAH-136. Japan wants aircraft that have already served with other armed forces and successfully shot down Shahed-like targets. They must connect to existing radar and command and control networks, require no more than 2 people for launch and flight management, and need minimal maintenance. The Defense Ministry has shown interest in the rocket-type Terra-1 and fixed-wing Terra-2 interceptors deployed in Ukraine, where the company said battlefield feedback was very positive. The Middle East war demonstrated the range and lethality of Shahed-type drones and placed pressure on American missile stocks. Japan's budget for unmanned defense capabilities increased from 111 billion yen to 277 billion yen this year, while the ruling party proposed annual production of about 80,000 drones by 2030.
5.3. Ukraine's newest strike weapon drifts into Russia on the wind. Ukraine is developing a DART missile released from a balloon near the edge of the stratosphere. The missile drops from an altitude of about 7 to 11 miles under satellite guidance. At roughly 4 miles altitude, navigation shuts down and a solid fuel motor carries the missile along a fixed course, preventing Russian jammers from pulling it off target. The missile carries a warhead of about 22 pounds, filled with conductive graphite filaments intended to short out power grids, although the system has not yet completed Ukrainian military codification. Ukraine has already floated more than 1,000 balloons into Russia and uses prevailing west to east winds to extend the depth of its strikes. A balloon can also carry a drone for dozens of miles before releasing it at altitude, increasing the Hornet attack drone's reach from about 93 miles to at least 186 miles. A balloon costing about $200 may also induce Russian forces to fire S-300 or S-400 interceptors worth millions of dollars. 5.4. Pentagon to explore cheaper replacements for the MQ-9 Reaper. The Pentagon began studying a cheaper, longer-range alternative to the MQ-9 Reaper. A Congressional Research Service report said dozens of MQ-9s had been shot down during the war with Iran, while the Air Force operated about 135 aircraft valued at roughly $30 million each. The Defense Innovation Unit launched a mass modular aircraft effort requiring at least a 2 800-pound payload, an unrefueled combat radius of at least 2,300 nautical miles, a one-way ferry range of at least 8,000 nautical miles, and the ability for one operator to control multiple aircraft. The program calls for a full-scale prototype flight test within 21 months of contract award and an initial operational capability in fiscal 2031, defined as 20 mission-capable aircraft delivered to an operational unit. The aim is not a more advanced Reaper, but an alternative that can absorb losses through numbers and sustain pressure on enemy defenses. 5.5. The U.S. Army goes into the breach without soldiers. The U.S. Army tested a heavy-lift drone as a substitute for soldiers during a dangerous breaching mission. The Army assumes that a deliberate breach could cost half of the forces assigned to it. Oregon Army National Guard engineers used a Mule 28 drone to carry a live Bangalore torpedo through 25-mile-per-hour gusts and blast a path through a wire obstacle after the soldiers had taken cover. The aircraft weighed 45 pounds, could lift 200 pounds, and was developed by Lorica Technologies in about 6 weeks. The engineers practiced repeatedly with inert training rounds before flying live explosives. They detonated the charge through shock tube rather than a wireless device to avoid jamming or premature initiation. The next prototype is intended to add artificial intelligence obstacle recognition so the drone can identify wire, position itself, and deploy the charge with less human input. 5.6. U.S. Army wants up to 100 drone boats to fill watercraft gap in Pacific. The U.S. Army's Pacific watercraft fleet fell from 134 vessels in 2018 to about 70 in 2024, while the mission-capable rate of the remaining boats dropped from more than 70% to less than 40%. The 8th Theater Sustainment Command wants to test a heavy autonomous vessel as early as next summer and rapidly build a fleet of 30 to 100 drone boats. The envisioned vessels would carry 8 to 10 standard shipping containers and could be pre-positioned in South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, Singapore, and Thailand. They would be controlled from headquarters in Hawaii and used for routine movement of equipment and supplies around the theater. The Army stressed that autonomous vessels would not replace every crewed boat. Complex operational maneuver and delivery to austere beaches would remain missions for crewed Army watercraft. 5.7. USMC awards $20 million contract for first autonomous ground vehicles. The U.S. Marine Corps awarded Overland AI a $20 million production contract for its first autonomous ground vehicles, with roughly a dozen vehicles expected within about 9 months. The vehicles can perform resupply and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions. They may also carry ammunition, parts, and other supplies for the Marine Air Defense Integrated System mounted on Joint Light Tactical Vehicles. The company displayed an Ultra vehicle weighing 2,500 pounds with a payload of about 1,000 pounds. The article said, autonomous ground vehicles can move operators away from danger near the mission area, while the U.S. military is beginning to move from experiments and prototypes into production contracts.
Section 6. Strategic Governance and Acquisition Systems. 6.1. Hegseth creates powerful new drone office, pulling authority from the military services. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth consolidated nearly all Pentagon drone and autonomous system programs under the new Direct Reporting Portfolio Manager for Unmanned Systems. The office will become the department's single joint integrator for unmanned and autonomous programs in the air, on the ground, and at sea. Its reach includes small drones, unmanned boats, ground robots, counter-drone systems, artificial intelligence, and swarming software. 2 existing organizations moved under it. Joint Interagency Task Force 401 will expand from countering small aerial drones to unmanned threats in every domain, while the Defense Autonomous Warfare Group will continue the effort to mass-produce cheap drones. The new office inherits a $53.6 billion budget request and receives authority over program milestones, contracting, funding shifts, and decisions to block fielding. Major defense acquisition programs will remain with the military services under their existing legal process. 6.2. Pentagon's top new weapons programs are 12 years behind schedule, Watchdog says. The Government Accountability Office reviewed 104 of the Pentagon's most expensive weapon programs and found that the average time to deliver a capability had risen beyond 12 years, while the department planned to invest more than $2.4 trillion in those programs. Among 72 programs, 46 reported cost increases totaling $122 billion. The Pentagon was also investing more than $49 billion in 23 major middle-tier acquisition projects, yet 18 of 40 programs entered the rapid pathway with immature technologies between 2018 and 2025. 7 of 8 current middle-tier projects were judged technologically immature. The MQ-25 Stingray's initial operational capability was delayed by 2.5 years. The DDG destroyer lacked a clear acquisition strategy, and the B-52 radar modernization program was moving toward production amid cost growth and schedule delays. The report said the rapid pathway was increasingly being used to mature technologies, which meant capabilities were not reaching the field any faster.
6.3 Operational Transformers 2026. Defense News 2026 Operational Transformers list recognizes leaders who turn defense innovation into deployed, usable capability. The selection emphasizes real-world fielding, integration into operational units, acquisition execution, scale of adoption, and measurable effects on readiness and warfighting. The list is organized around program and acquisition office leaders, service-level modernization and capability integration, rapid capabilities and experimentation, industry operational delivery, and joint and interagency capability fielding. Those recognized include Robert Collins, Luke Cropsey, Thomas Dickinson, Brian Schimpf, Brandon Sang, Owen West, Michael Gatlin, and Matt Ross.
Section 7. Land Warfare Firepower and Force Transformation. 7.1. U.S. Army's Tropic Lightning Division ponders transformation lessons from Philippine war games. 4 of the U.S. Army's 25th Infantry Division's 5 brigades had already undergone major change. The next step is transformation of the Combat Aviation Brigade and the relocation of a Gray Eagle drone company from Alaska to Hawaii. The division was the first U.S. infantry division to receive HIMARS, and the longer-range firepower made division artillery the most transformed part of the formation. During the Balakatan and Salaknib exercises in the Philippines from April through June, the division repeatedly infiltrated HIMARS launchers onto islands in the Luzon Strait and tested drones, counter-drone systems, electronic warfare, next-generation command and control, and software-enabled technology. The formation also used an expeditionary forge capability to 3D print parts forward and thicken its sustainment lines. The commander said the division was transforming all the time, but the process had to be managed with discipline. 7.2. As one Australian Army brigade bulks up with armor, fuel, and ammo needs spike. The Australian Army's 3rd Brigade is transforming into a heavy armored formation. Its heavy armored vehicle fleet will grow by 630% in 3 years, while personnel increase from 3,200 to about 4,000. Daily diesel demand during high-intensity operations will rise from 40,000 liters to more than 300,000 liters, and daily ammunition requirements will increase from about 30 pallets to 105 pallets. The brigade has received M1A2 SEPV-3 Abrams tanks and will add assault breaching vehicles, armored bridges, AS-9 Huntsman self-propelled howitzers, AS-21 Redback infantry fighting vehicles, and Boxer reconnaissance vehicles. Artillery batteries will move from 4 M777A2 howitzers to 6 AS-9s, and the commander said firepower, mobility, and protection would increase by at least 300%. The expansion also requires more recovery vehicles, logistics units, maintenance hangars, training facilities, and vehicle maintenance skills.
7.3. Size matters. KNDS pitches long-barreled artillery for 60-kilometer base range. KNDS unveiled a 155mm long-barreled howitzer called Loris. It uses a 58 caliber gun tube, about 12% longer than the 52 caliber barrels common on recent European artillery, and the company says it can reach 60 kilometers with standard high-explosive shells. The weapon combines KNDS Germany's artillery gun module on a tracked Boxer chassis with a French-made barrel. A prototype has already been fired, and serial production is planned between 2032 and 2035. KNDS also increased the propellant range to 1 through 8 modular charges and is developing conventional high-explosive illumination and smoke rounds intended to exploit the 60-kilometer range without relying on rocket-assisted projectiles.
All right, we are now ready to enter today's main program. Before we do, please like, save, and share this episode, so that other people who need it can also see today's content and become better versions of themselves. Thank you. You can now use the timeline in the video description or the pinned comment to find the articles that interest you and listen to them in depth.